Hi, Elizabeth. I read a really interesting quote the other day when I was cruising around on the internet, and it says, when it comes to men and women, there's a clear answer as to who is filing for divorce more often. Nearly 70% of divorces are initiated by the wife. In addition, over 50% of divorced wives say they never want to remarry, which I've seen in my coaching, while only about 30% of men express that same sentiment. And I have to tell you, that just really caught me off guard. And I had to go back and think about this. So I Googled some more statistics. And what's interesting is it says, according to General Survey, men are more likely to cheat, one of the number one reasons people get divorced. And then the other one is communication, lack of communication. And I'm not trying to generalize, but women do generally tend to try and communicate more. So what's going on that we as women are the ones that are carrying the burden of making that decision to file the paperwork and to make this divorce happen, when statistically maybe we're not the ones creating the problems?
You want my take on it?
Sure.
This is not from a study. This is just like my own gut feel about it. I think it's because men are chicken shit. Nothing against the men out there that might be watching, but men just kind of like to keep the status quo. So if whether they're cheating or whether it's communication or whether it's money or whatever it may be that's causing friction in the marriage, that's leading to the conversation of divorce or the thoughts of divorce, I think men, they just like to sweep stuff under the rug. They don't want to address it. They don't want to talk about it. Just leave their home life the same, leave their work life the same, no change, steady Eddie. And that's why women have to take the bull by the horns and be the ones to take the first step.
I'm glad you said that. Thank you. Because one of the trends that I'm seeing, and when I get divorce coaching clients, it's because they've got a big nasty divorce going on. So something's happened. And I am seeing a trend of where the man decides he's leaving, maybe with a reason or maybe without. But yet the woman who would be my client is the one left holding the bag. And if she wants to get herself extracted from the situation of a husband who's not helping with the bills, who's left, who may not even be coming to see the kids anymore, she has to pick this up and file for the divorce and make it happen, all while being told she's the bad guy when she was the one that didn't initiate the whole situation in the first place. And it's always befuddled me how this happens so often. And so I think your assessment might be targeting something that's a little close to the truth there.
Yeah. And like I said, it's not from any factual basis. It's just kind of the way it seems when you think about men's typical behavior, even in happy marriages. If you have a wonderful marriage, but you still have friction, you're still going to argue about things and stuff. And how often is it that you get into some discussion and then the husband just wants to drop it, sweep it under the rug, not talk about it, just kiss and make up, forget it ever happened? And I just think that's just kind of the way they deal with things. And sadly, women, we just internalize it. And then we chew on it and we stew over it and we fret about it and then we worry and then we grieve and it turns into all sorts of stuff. Men like to sweep things under the carpet.
Well, and I call that the accommodation resentment cycle. And you described it so beautifully in that, hey, we're not going to have this argument, or we're not going to talk about that, or we're just going to put that aside. So we accommodate and we accommodate and we accommodate. And eventually, when you start accommodating the other person more than you're comfortable with, you begin to resent. And then when you resent, the love goes, the respect goes, the relationship goes. And eventually, for your own sanity and safety or mental health, if nothing else, you come to that conclusion, this has to end. But just like you said, that argument that gets swept under the rug, they may well be willing to leave. but they don't want to be the one to initiate the divorce. And I always wonder, I have a thesis of my own that it's about winning and losing. And we know that as women, we want everything to be a win-win. We want everyone to be okay. We want to make sure this is the best solution for everyone and that one person isn't negatively impacted. My clients are like, oh, I want to be fair. I want to be fair. I don't want to ask for too much. I don't want to take what I don't deserve. I don't want to take what I don't need. And the problem is we're not looking at what winning and losing in a divorce is defined by in a man's standpoint, because when they get divorced, for them, it's about, did I get a good settlement? Did I get taken to the cleaners or did I win? Did I get out of paying child support? And I'm always shocked at how many men who say they're amazing fathers, first thing they say is, fine, we can get divorced, but I am not paying child support. And it's like they peg themselves to that one fact that is so unfortunate for everyone, because that's not for the wife, that's for the children. That's to make sure the children's lives go uninterrupted. So it's that viewpoint of, did I win or did I lose? And I don't think women, when they get divorced, we go into it with the I have lost attitude. I've already lost because my marriage has failed. Whereas a man may still have that feeling of there's something to be fighting for here. And it's getting the win and winning the divorce battle. Does that make any sense to you? Do you think maybe I'm onto something there?
You're right when you say that women go into the divorce process already wearing the uniform of the loser. The marriage has failed, so we have lost, period, end of story. Where the man goes in, they also do everything with a more business mindset. So they go from the I'm married arrangement to the I'm getting a divorce phase. And it's just a business stepping stone. It's like, okay, we're just going from this thing to this thing to the that and the that. And at the end of the day, they want to win. And since it moved from marriage to divorce process, then that means they have to win the divorce. And they never think about having lost the marriage, I don't think. Maybe.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to me how often I have clients that come to me and their husbands have left. But yet they're the one holding the bag. They're the one that has to take the process forward. So I just want to say to anybody watching this, if that has happened to you, you are not the only woman that's happened to. And if they've left, that's when you find out why they left. And so that adds a whole nother, layer onto the whole situation. But yet now you are still trying to be fair and equitable and not ruffle the feathers, because if you're nice, we can get this done.
Something else, something I experienced with one of my clients was they had separated, living in totally different places. And he had stated that he wanted a divorce. So he did verbalize it. And then they started working. I don't know how long they lived separately, but it was for many months, like 6 months, 7 or 8 months. And then they start talking about divorce, and it's mostly occurring over text and email. And he was telling her what he would give her, what he was willing to leave behind, which he was actually quite generous. He was kind of walking away from most everything. But what was so interesting is as I was working with her, she would tell me about these conversations and say, but he hasn't filed. He hasn't filed. He still hasn't filed. And it was just really interesting because he is like ironing everything out, but he's not talking about filing for divorce. And so finally she broached the subject because she got her courage up and just said, well, when are you going to file? Because I don't want to be surprised when, I get served. And he still danced around it. And so she asked me, she says, what do you think I should do? And of course, I don't want to give advice on something like that, but I did tell her that I thought it would be helpful to her if she got some legal counsel. And
Yes,
I
and
said,
that
just go talk to somebody. Because you don't have, a lot of times you don't have to do that, just a quick consultation. You don't have to pay. You don't have to engage them and pay a retainer. And so in that process, she finally, and it took quite a while, probably, I don't know, 4 or 6 weeks. And she finally, we were having another conversation. She's like, I just don't understand him. He's not filing for divorce, but yet we're living like this and we're divvying everything up. And she said, I don't want to have to be the one to file for divorce. And I asked her, I said, why not? She said, because I don't want the divorce. I wanted my marriage to work. I didn't want it to be over. He chose this. And I said, so you want to get back together? And she's like, well, no, not really anymore. And she had started seeing the chinks in his armor. And I said, well, why is it that it bothers you to be the one to file if that's what you decide to do? She said, because it just seems to me like I'm giving up. And I said, well, what are you giving up on? Because he's left, he's gone. And I wasn't asking her that question for her to give me an answer. I was asking her that question so she could think about it. And at the end of the day, eventually she did end up filing for divorce. And what was really interesting is what she did. And of course, I was trying to affirm her, okay, this does not say anything about you. It doesn't say that you're the one that quit because he already quit. But she felt relief once she did that. Because then she could start walking through the next phase so she could get to some point where she would have closure. She could start again.
and that's what we need as women is we need closure, and we need to be able to see what our life is going to be like. And I mean, I don't like to tell my stories that much, but my ex-husband left, my second ex-husband, and he left. I waited a year and a half. A year and a half. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Thinking he would do something. And finally, after a year and a half, I said, well, okay, I asked him 3 times. He did nothing. I filed for divorce. He went berserk. That's what he was waiting for, was for me to be the bad guy, that I filed for divorce. And then the fight was on. And a lot of times I say to my clients, if you can handle the not knowing, which as women is the hardest part, is the not knowing. If you can handle the not knowing, wait him out, make him file. Because when he files, then he's the one starting it. And you have more of a chance. And the person that files first pays the bigger attorneys, because now all you're doing is responding. They're having to draft it all, and all you have to do is respond. So if you can get him to file, and I waited a year and a half, he wouldn't file. I've got clients a year, however long, not filing. And the last thing that I want to touch on before we close this out is communication. He's left, or maybe he hasn't. Maybe you left, or maybe you want to leave. And now you're in this conundrum of who files and how do we get this divorce done. Communication is now more critical than ever. That you're clear, you're concise, and you say what you mean, and you mean what you say. Because this is not a time to threaten or react and threaten and then say, oh, I didn't really mean that. It's about making your communication clear and letting it be known. If you've left and I want a divorce, and we're going to go forward, communication is a two-way street. And if they're not talking and we're not talking, nothing is going to get done. So you need to keep your communication clear, clean, and concise, and in accordance of what your attorney wants you to communicate or not communicate. But remember that, you can't control what the other person does, but you can control what you do. And if you set that stage and that groundwork that you're going to communicate what you need, what you want, and if you have to be the one to file for divorce, that's fine. Not fine, but it is what it is. Be honest with yourself. As women, I see this all the time. that we end up in this situation for whatever reason, and we're the ones that want to get it done because we can't handle the not knowing and the uncertainty. And that is one of the hardest things to convince someone that, things are going to be fine when there is nothing showing that at the time.
That's very true. Very true. One thing that I would suggest is that if your communication is in writing, whether that's text or email, be extremely careful with how you word things and the potential for a perception of your tone being one that's hostile. Just try to write it like you're writing a stranger or a business letter or something like that. But just be very careful how you compose things, because you put something in writing, you cannot undo that. And it can be of record. So just be very careful. But I do think,
Absolutely.
being communicative, being direct in what you want, even in the best of times, how often do men say, "Well, just tell me what you want. Like, I don't have, mental telepathy. I can't read your mind." And as women, we do tend to just dance all around the bush without telling them what it is we want or need. So be direct, be very specific. That would be my advice.